Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Benmergui. Welcome to Not That Kind of Rabbi, the show where really I'm not that kind of rabbi. I am a spiritual director. It's one of the things that has happened for me over the period of my life. And it's not quite the same thing as being a rabbi. And one of the good things about it is you don't have all the congregational duties of a rabbi. You don't have to be there every time and then have everybody judge whether you were a good rabbi or a bad rabbi that week, whether you were entertaining enough as a rabbi. But nonetheless, I do enjoy the life of the spirit very much and love talking to people through that lens on this program. We've had some fantastic guests and lots of people that I've never met. And then sometimes we get to talk to people who haven't spoken to in a very long time, but would love to connect again with. So in this case, we find ourselves in the middle of a biblical moment in the history of the world. It was just Passover a little while ago for some of us, and there's the thing, you see, the plagues themselves seem to be reenacting them. I thought climate change was giving us our plagues, but now we're actually, like, who on earth would have known that a virus would be the thing that changed the channel? I could not have called this one. It's impossible that this thing you can't taste or touch or hear or smell, that you don't know if you even have it, and you don't know who else has it. And then when you go to the grocery store, you're looking at people like it's a zombie apocalypse, and if they touch you, you're toast. And then you pick up the orange and think, is it on this orange? Should I just bathe myself in sanitizer while in the car? I'm in the car, as Jackie Mason used to say. I don't know the answer to these things, and my guest doesn't either, but that doesn't matter. We'll just discuss. But joining me is someone who I think I met maybe in 1988, 87. He had a Busker tape, a cassette tape. It was a good tape. And we ended up doing some interviews on radio, on TV, and one thing I'll never forget is we ended up at the Dawson City Music Festival and to find our way to our airplane in the middle of the night. And there was one guy at the Jam who would, especially men are convinced they can play drums. All men think they're funny and they can play drums. And this one guy was playing a hand drum, and Tyler, the drummer for the Bare Naked Ladies at the time, looked at me with the look of, if I could kill him and get away with it, I would kill him and get away with it. So that's how it worked. Stephen Page joins me now, and I'm very happy to see you. How are you, sir?
I'm well. I'm hanging in. I'm still alive. No virus that I can tell yet.
Yeah.
How are you?
Well, I'm kind of on the side of this. Like, it's very hard sometimes. Still got two, believe it or not, your kids, I think, are like, what, 19, 22, 17?
Yeah, 19, 21, and 23.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've got a 33-year-old and a 30-year-old, but I've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Right? Okay? That's commitment.
Yeah.
So I've got the homeschooling thing and the occasionally my family's driving me crazy thing. And then there's the thank God I have a family thing.
Right.
So there's all that going on. But there's also this thing of, is this our moment? I mean, God forbid, for some people, this is their moment, like John Prine, for one. And,
yeah.
I want to talk to you about Adam Schlesinger as well. But yeah, like, is this our moment to reboot, to actually rethink what we're doing and snap out of the trance of this extractive, consumptive society that we've created? So I don't know. Do any of those thoughts occur to you in the middle of all this, or? Well,
I wonder sometimes whether I am snapping out of the trance yet. Like, when is that going to happen for me? Because I feel like right now I'm kind of in a new trance. In the first week of the panic, when things started to shut down, I was very productive, writing a bunch of new songs and recording them and putting stuff online. And then you kind of see the rest of the world doing that same kind of thing. And I kind of retreated. I'm still working, but, even my ability to work seems muted. Like, I go downstairs to my studio that I'm in right now, and what would have intrigued me for a good 8 hours kind of holds my attention for about 45, and then I'm just exhausted. I kind of feel this overall exhaustion. And and I wonder, I'm sure it's good to slow down, but I think it's also, it takes a toll too. And I think that right now I am consuming a lot of TV, a lot of movies, listening to music. So I'm still kind of in this consuming state too.
Yeah,
Food, a lot of food.
the what?
Oh, I'm eating lots of food, consuming.
Oh, I know because it's there,
Uh-huh.
right? It's like, what else? I can't go out.
Yeah.
I can't
Well,
be
that's
in
it.
the
The
food.
plans are what's for dinner today?
At breakfast, that's
Yeah.
the question. What's
Oh,
for
totally.
dinner today? But there's also this need to feel productive,
Yeah.
right? That you're not worthy if you are just relaxing, just
That's right.
stopping, just going on sabbatical. And so, did that push you a lot too at the beginning of this?
I think at the beginning, I was one of the things was when things started to shut down. I was at the Stratford Festival working on this musical that I co-wrote with Daniel McIver, and it's something that we've been working on for 7 years now. And it was finally coming to fruition. We were working with the actors and director and the whole creative team, and it was supposed to be opening in June. And then they sent us home. And at that point, I thought, well, this is terrible, but this is my opportunity to do the other stuff that I was worried I wasn't going to be able to do. Part of what I have to continue to do in order to tour and look myself in the mirror and is to keep writing and making records. And I didn't know how I was going to have time to do that. So first thing I thought was, great, here's a chance for me to finish my record. And it's taken me just as long as it always used to take me. And I don't even know what I'm squeezing the work in between now.
So, why do you think that is? That it's taking you just as long?
Well, I've had to tell myself just what you were saying, that it's okay to take the time and not be as productive, or not have to show how productive you are.
Yeah.
Because productivity, especially in a creative pursuit, a lot of that just happens, up in the brain pan, and it's not always in the exercise of putting the pen to paper, or notes on tape or whatever else. That sometimes it's just about processing, and it's about looking at, when I look at lyrics that I've written, and I think, well, how do they fit in a world that I don't know what it's going to be when this finally sees the light of day. And I'm pleased that some of them are about bigger things that I don't understand. And that's, there
Like
are some
what?
songs about, there's some songs about trying to get my head around things like quantum physics, or the idea of, and it's some of the stuff that I think you like to talk about, like stuff like the idea of what is God. When I've approached religion in previous records, like my last two, for example, a lot of it is my critique of people who I find to be blindly religious, or religious as an identity, at the expense of reason or empathy, or uh, open-mindedness towards things like science or public health or whatever else. And now that kind of interests me less and less. I think we see it so plainly in front of us on the news all the time, especially, I live in the States, so look
Yeah.
what's happening down here. Um, that I think what has interested in me more has been, well, why don't I understand what I don't understand? I'm not a dummy, but there are things that there are whether they're scientific concepts or spiritual concepts that are beyond my grasp, and that to me is fascinating and worth writing about.
It's interesting. I used to always joke, I think, with you as well, that you were the cantor. You were
Sure, that's what my mom always wanted me to be.
well, and sometimes when I've heard you singing over the years, I just thought, no, he really is a cantor. He just doesn't know it, because when you're hitting that angelic note and the person is listening to it, music is a form of worship, and it brings people together in congregation. And all those people who come to your concerts, and I guess these days they take their phones instead of Bic lighters, and moving back and forth. They're searching, they're yearning for more meaning in their life. I mean,
Yeah.
you feel that, right?
Yeah, and I've learned that more and more as I've gotten older, and since I left Bare Naked Ladies, trying to kind of find my place in the world and what's the value of singing the old songs or that kind of thing. And
Right.
I realized over time that, like, let's say singing an old song like Brian Wilson, which I wrote when I was 19, and you think, well, God, I'm almost 50 now. It's like, it's not really the same person, but it's all part of my journey. It's all part of my life story. But even bigger than that, it's part of the audience's life story. And to have some songs like that, or If I Had $1 Million, whatever else, that as maybe even as light as If I Had $1 Million might be, I realized that I was lucky enough to be involved in writing like a campfire song. That, like, a song like that has nothing to do with me anymore. It has to do with the audience and their lives, and whether it's the soundtrack to their first year in university, or it's their camping trip, or it's the song their grandparents sang, or whatever it is now. That's what they bring with them when I sing a song in concert. And when they're singing along with me, they're just shooting all those memories, their own memories, into the room. And that's amazing to me.
Yeah, well put. Well put. I mean, I think about, like, your mother was Jewish. Your father converted to try to keep your mother's family happy. It didn't work. They could have cared less. Did you get any kind of religious upbringing, or was it just kind of a bunch of confusing signals?
Oh, no, absolutely. Like, I went to religious school from the age of 6 until about 17. So I had bar mitzvah, and then we did a confirmation class where they sent us to Israel for the summer when I was 17. And we had our Zoom Seder this Passover. And the funny thing is, like, my parents had the Seder on the first night, and it's just my mom and dad because nobody else was around or allowed in. And my dad still insists on reading the whole Haggadah. So even though, so he's the guy who wasn't born Jewish, but a lot of those traditions he takes very, very seriously.
And you?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, my kids, I have 2 stepkids as well.
Okay.
My wife has a daughter who's 21 and a son who's 15, and there's kind of no religion in our house when we're everyday life, apart from I do have a mezuzah on the door, and light the Hanukkah candles when I think of it, and that kind of thing. But my kids, my ex and myself, we actually had them converted.
Yeah, because Carolyn didn't convert, right?
That's right. But she was very keen on raising the kids Jewish, and we were members of the Danforth Jewish Circle.
Yeah, good one.
And the kids all did their religious education through there, and their bar mitzvahs, and a couple of my kids continued to teach there, taught part of the bar mitzvah class and stuff. So it's very much part of their identity, and something that they feel is them.
So when you think of spirituality in your own life now, like you were saying, a part of you right now is actually has the time to think of the really big questions. And I think it's in June you're going to be 50. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So for everybody, there come these points. I always find birthdays with a 0 in them kind of slap me in the side of the head. Like, what? I have to say what? So where does that leave you when it comes to those, why are we here questions?
I was gauging this year more by the fact that my musical was going to be on stage, and that was going to be my 2020 and my 50 year. And I think about the fact that even when I was a little kid, I used to imagine imagining the year 2000 and imagining the year 2020, because those are nice round years, and being born in 70, it was a nice round year for me as well. But I don't know if it's like, I think in a certain way, I'm in the least amount of crisis I've been in as an adult, or even as a person. I feel like the most okay. It doesn't mean I don't struggle all the time, but I don't feel like I'm unhappy with my station in life, or what my choices have been, or whatever else. And that I think that affords me the opportunity to think about the bigger thing, because I think thinking about the bigger thing is also thinking about other people, and that's another part of the journey I've had over the last 10 years or so. Is once I finally understood that it wasn't all about me, and that there was that seeing the same events through other people's eyes, or imagining these certain events in my life being erased from history, and realizing what a small, insignificant effect they would have on the world. It kind of gave me peace, as opposed to anxiety.
Yeah, it's interesting in spiritual journeying. There's a guy named Richard Rohr who's a Christian mystic, and I really like his stuff. I get his emails regularly, his daily meditations, and he's a Catholic of the sort of high spiritual order, as opposed to the high rules order. But he's got stuff that really makes you think about the ego and what place the ego has in getting in our way.
Right.
It doesn't help us as much, especially, as performers. I remember when I was more of a performer, where I had, as a stand-up, and I would get out there, and you just realize that I remember somebody got this horrible review, a friend of mine, and he was crushed. He was just like, how could they say that? Like, I worked so hard on that show, and what do you mean it sucks? And I said, look, here's the thing. You got to either believe them. If you believe them when they love you, you got to believe them when they think you're a joke.
True.
You've given away your power. So you got to know yourself. You don't need somebody to tell you if you had a good show. Like when somebody would tell me I had a good show and I didn't, I'd be more upset with them for doing that. Don't cheer me up. I'm perfectly aware that sucked.
Well, and then I learned fairly early on that sometimes I was totally wrong. Like my sense of that was a mediocre to terrible show, and somebody who'd seen us 100 times would say, that's the best time I've ever seen you guys. And your mind does a million things, thinking, are you an idiot, or am I an idiot, or like what show do we just watch there? But maybe it's because part of you is working so hard to keep the quality of the show up, and the other part of you has kind of already given up and on stage. And I think there's that balance.
Yeah. Laurence Olivier came off stage, and there were 5 standing ovations at the end of his performance he had given. Great British actor, and he walks off, and he's really upset. And the stage manager said, Sir Lawrence, what's the problem? Like, they loved you. And he goes, I don't know what I did tonight. I just don't know.
Yeah.
But the problem was he was so present that he didn't have that self-censor sitting on his shoulder going, you're not singing that right, or you're not doing that line right, or you didn't stand right. And he lost that by being totally present, but then he just knew he could not repeat what he did that night, which is a big mistake any artist makes, is, I think I'll do last night's show, it killed, right?
Well, I remember doing a corporate show, must have been 20 years ago, in Las Vegas for like the Dodge Dealers of America, and it was whose median age is probably 75.
Yeah.
And I think it was when they had a big awards night and stuff for Chrysler the night before, and they'd had Celine Dion, and huge star, and then the next night for Dodge they had Bare Naked Ladies, and it was kind of they all knew they were quite the successful brands. But we had Dana Carvey was on before us.
Oh, yeah.
And he walked off stage, and the audience was very tepid towards him. And we were talking to him, and said that the audience didn't really, like, they were kind of a shitty audience, weren't they? And he said, yeah, it's their fault. Like, I realize it's that this act works, and if they don't like it, it's their problem, not mine. And I've never heard, because it was the opposite of the way we always work. We were always like, do you like us? Do you like us now? Do you like us now? What if we do this? Do you like that? And it kind of like made me, it was the first time I'd thought about it that way. And it felt so kind of callous and not the reason why we performed. But sometimes it gives me some comfort to know it's okay to know that what you're doing works.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I'm kind of torn on that.
I think I have an obligation as a performer to invite the audience in. And I think that sometimes if they don't get it, it's not because I didn't do a good enough job with my show, but in the way I presented it that night, I didn't open the door wide enough for them.
Right. So you said a few things that make me think about something that sounds like it's grown in you over the years, and that's compassion. Would you say that's true?
So, yeah. I mean, God, I'm not perfect, but it's certainly far closer to the front of my mind than it ever was. I think I spent my younger years very focused on what I was doing, and I mean that was a good thing, and was always I think compassionate about people in general, about helping out, about raising awareness and being charitable and so on. But working in the room with other people, probably far less aware of other people's point of view, other people's feelings, far less. I probably valued it far less than I do now. I think about when I work now in whatever room, whether it's at Stratford or whether it's with the Stephen Page trio that I play with now, it's so effortless in a way. Like, you work hard, but it's emotionally effortless, because I've learned to trust the people I work with and hand things over to them. And, I look back at the way I was in my late teens and early 20s and I think, God, like, why was I so wound up about all that stuff? But I think then I always felt I would lose myself if I didn't stand my ground on every little bit.
Well, I mean, not to be too hard on yourself, when you're 19 or 20 or 24 or 28 or whatever, there's a lot more at stake, we think, in terms of our worthiness. Am I really, especially when you get success? You got success and people were lining up to see you, and you have to, I mean, for some people, they're walking in the backstage door and they're seeing this crowd out front and thinking, me? Oh, crap, I better do this well. Or, why me? Not me. Like, you're not really actually here to see me. So it can really play with your...
My thing was always, as long as these people don't catch on that I'm a total fraud, then everything's fine. But anything I can do to make sure that they don't know the truth, that I'm not worthy of this.
But that's heavy, man. I mean, that's a heavy, sort of cone of silence, get smart cone of silence. I hope nobody knows what we're saying in here, because if they find out I'm not actually Steve Page, that I'm just a guy, that's a lot. One of the things that I didn't know is that there were challenges for you with mental health. Mm. I didn't know that. I'd never intuited that in being around you. And I read something about bipolar, and I don't understand bipolar. So I was hoping, if it didn't bug you, that you could tell me a little about that.
Well, I have mixed feelings about diagnosis in general. It's such an inexact science. When it comes to those, there are certain mental illnesses that are much more easily diagnosable, and many of them are much more severe than what I've struggled with. But I've gone, for the multitude of doctors and therapists I've gone to. I mean, I was first diagnosed as bipolar by my family doctor in the course of 5 minutes. I mean,
how did you
that
feel?
Reliable?
How did you feel?
I felt like giving up, because part of that is that here's an antidepressant, and here is lithium to combat your manic episodes, and you're going to need to take that for the rest of your life. And when you're 24, that feels like a death sentence, and it feels like punishment. Everything felt like punishment to me. So I took it seriously in varying degrees. And I think for the longest time, I took my mental health struggles more as like a badge of honor. Like it somehow made me, it somehow gave me the brand of tortured artist that I'd so wanted to, the mantle that I'd wanted to carry. And it probably, well, I know it wasn't until I was in my late 30s when I got arrested that I actually started to take my mental health seriously. And I know I've struggled with depression and anxiety, but also these manic episodes that for the longest time, I didn't see any of those episodes coming. And I didn't know how to cope with them when they would come. And they would manifest in either just complete lifelessness or largely kind of anger, which is one thing people don't talk about a lot with the manic side, because I think the stereotype is grandiose, sometimes extra fun-loving kind of behavior, which is part of it. But I also realized as I started to take this more seriously in the last 15 years or so, was that neither the depressive side nor the manic side helped me. I mean, maybe because I've had experience with them, I have some ability to reflect on them and write about them after the fact. But while in the throes of either of those situations, they've only made life and work and relationships harder. And they just distance me from other people. And as I've worked towards finding some balance and some middle ground, I've been much more productive, happy with the work I do, happy with the way I conduct relationships. But it's always a work in progress.
Thank you for sharing that with me, by the way. I was hesitant to talk about it because it's not my business, it's yours. But thank you for that. Okay. I appreciate it. But one of the things I found with artists, sometimes in interviewing artists over the years, is I don't want to mess with my mojo. If this is working and everybody loves me and I'm putting out songs that I'm thinking, or I'm doing a show and I'm performing and this is pretty good. You think to yourself, don't mess with this chemistry, even if it's bad chemistry. Did that happen?
Oh, I definitely used to think that. And I would take an antidepressant and it would help me get out of bed, but I wouldn't have the depth of feeling that I thought I had. I wouldn't, my emotions, maybe even my ideas felt dulled. And I thought, well, what was the point of that? And I'd been on and off medications for years. But I think when I started to kind of face the fact that I was, that at that point, 12 years ago, that I was potentially going to lose everything, my, relationship with my kids, all kinds of things like that. I thought, well, what would I like to have? What's the thing I want to have the most? And I realized that I wanted to be able to look myself in the mirror, and I wanted my kids to be able to look at me and feel a connection, and that all led me towards taking better care of myself first and foremost. And then the fact that I could still do work and realize that I started making music that I was as proud of or prouder of than I'd ever done, then that old argument of losing my mojo didn't mean anything.
It's also it seems from a distance that there was a leap of musical faith, a leap of faith about yourself that you had to go through to really find your voice. You had a voice, and everybody loved it and all that, blah, blah, big band, lots of arena stuff. But I turned around and see you do the art of ensemble, the what's it called?
The Art of Time Ensemble.
Art of Time, yeah. Art of Time Ensemble. And I think, oh, is this him? Is this actually him? Am I right in that there was a journey to self that was in there?
Absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to be asked by Andrew Barashko if I wanted to do a concert with the Art of Time. And it just kind of blew my mind open because it was the ability there. The first concert I did was all covers. So it was a chance for me to do songs that I always loved, but in a kind of a classical setting. And do something different with my voice, like kind of use what I felt was my real voice, or a bigger version of it, or a more nuanced version of it. And it was terrifying, but exhilarating. And then from I've done several projects with them and a bunch of tours and so on. And it's really the biggest thing it taught me was, I'd spent 20 years in a band with the same guys, and you really develop your roles inside that band,
Right.
and your ideas of what each of you is good or not good at. And it kind of like, although the thing I was good at was writing songs and being a singer, in the background, it meant the things I was bad at were playing guitar or music theory or whatever those things might be. Just like somebody might say to Tyler, you can't write a song. Well, we don't know that 100%, but we just kind of decided what these roles were. Being outside of that, I didn't have anybody telling me what I couldn't do. I had the opportunity to figure that out for myself. And so going into a room with all these hotshot, top of the A-list classical and jazz musicians, it's terrifying. When you're there with sheet music, and I haven't read sheet music since I was in choir when I was 18 or something. But they don't know that. So you fight your way through it. And eventually, like, I'm writing orchestral arrangements for some of my material now and stuff, because I've allowed myself to learn how to do stuff I didn't know how to do before, or going to make my first solo record and not knowing what the hell it was going to sound like. And then realizing, oh, I do know how to do this. I've done a whole bunch of records over the 20 years and watched and learned from my bandmates and learned from producers and whatever else, and learned what I can't do, where that's when you enlist somebody else to help you, a great drummer or horn section or whatever else. But there's also nobody else in my room if I'm trying to figure out a guitar part and it takes me all day. And so be it. Nobody's laughing at me except for me.
It's family, right? Like, that band you had for 20 years was family. And when you go into your own family, you're 12 years old again and you're looking in your mother's fridge.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yeah. And in 2 years, my first marriage broke down, and then I was out of the band. So that's two different things that I had been in for so long, since I was 18, both of those relationships. And I walked out, and it was exactly like that. I felt like I was like the 17-year-old who was walking into those relationships, walking out of them again, and going, well, how do I be an adult in the world?
But it's liberating, too, because it's like when you went to summer camp and you didn't know anyone in your cabin. Well, now you could be anybody you wanted to be. I went to the Island Science School in Toronto. For some unknown reason, my principal decided I should go because I was nothing but trouble. And I get to the docks, and my father lets me off and goes to his job. And I'm standing there, and this kid walks up to me and goes, "Hi, what's your name?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Mike." Why did I just do that? What the hell was I thinking? But I just thought, I can be anybody I want. I'm Mike.
Right.
And God love the counselors. They did not call me out on this, and they let me be called Mike for the entire week. So,
fantastic.
So that's the liberation part. Leaving a family's hard. And I always hoped that, even though there might have been struggles in leaving the Bare Naked Ladies, that there's still love, that you still have some love for these guys because of all the things you went through together. Is there some love there, or is it kind of still confused? Or?
Oh no, I absolutely have. And that took time. I mean, it was weird. I think when we first split, we all thought it was going to be very easy and amicable. I think it's any kind of adult split tends to be. You think it's going to be, and then it gets sticky and difficult, and all the sore subjects start to kind of rear their heads. But no, I have so many good memories of being with those guys. I mean, musically and just as human beings. One thing that's helped me a lot is I have everything on random in my car when I'm driving. I listen on my
Right.
phone. And sometimes these live improvs that we would do would come up, and I'll still die laughing at some of these things. Like, and I just feel like, God, that band was amazing. Just the way the five of us would gel. Ed and I back and forth with the stream of consciousness raps, but also the other guys cluing in on everything we were doing. It was amazing. A psychic experience.
I always think of Kevin. You never knew when Kevin was going to say something.
Oh, I know. He's the slyest. He'd be the one who be silent, and he'd have one line that would just the perfect gotcha.
Slip it in. Look, people, you guys, whoever it was, you just slip one in. You're still there. I forgot you were standing behind that thing. That's
totally.
Good. And you and Ed, you good? You all right?
I guess so. I mean, we did they inducted us in the Hall of Fame a couple years ago at the Junos, and
how'd that feel?
It felt great. Oh. It was really nice. I brought my boys with me, which was really a special thing for them because they grew up in that band and in that band family. And it was a chance for the kids to see each other again. But honestly, after that, and I felt really up and good about it. And I certainly wasn't gunning for my old job back or anything else. But there really hasn't been a ton of contact. A little bit here and there. And I guess maybe for them especially, it's just easier to let it go. I think I try and look at it from their point of view too. They've kept the name and have been able to kind of rebuild, and they're doing well. But they don't really have to answer for where's the other. I don't have to answer for where's the other guys, where they might have to with some people. And I think it must be tiring for them. Just still be making X number of records after that, and still have people asking.
Well, your marriage, your band, all of it, like you said, there's shadows that are there with those things, absences. I know that I have had 2 marriages and have 2 sets of kids from those marriages, and yet there's always a part of me with the first marriage and with those children of thinking, I hurt those kids. I didn't want to hurt those kids, but I hurt those kids. And spiritually, that's one of those real challenging things. And right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I carry that with me. I think my fear always of somehow not being the father I wanted to be. Yeah. And it was always it followed me, and it followed me through my songs and so on for a certain period of time. But I see as my kids are adults, they're able to yell at me if they want to now, and it's been shockingly good. I'm still bracing for it. One day they'll be visiting when they're in their 30s, and the roof will blow off the house. But I think in general, it's like they know where my heart is, and they know that it's with them. And it's I'm lucky to have the men that I have as my kids too.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to tie yourself to the mast for the storm and just keep loving them because it'll come back, right?
Yeah,
that's a tough one. Somebody you knew, a songwriter, Adam Schlesinger.
Mm-hmm.
Passed
I didn't
away.
Actually know him. I knew him. I certainly was a fan of his. He was this one half of the songwriting team of the band Fountains of Wayne, and then since then, he wrote a musical Crybaby. He wrote all the songs for that show, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Just tons. Like one of these guys who never stops writing. But he's only a couple years older than me, and he was one of he was one of us. Like he was of a school of songwriters, much like me and Ed, who mixed humor and kind of a literate cleverness and pathos with a pop song shell. He did it, as good as anybody. And he got hit by the virus and died a few weeks ago. Just total shock.
Him and John Prine just died too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever feel that there's a clock running Do you ever feel like I got to get more done? I can't stop. What if what if it's now? Do those things creep in there?
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think, also in my darkest times. We can go back to mental health stuff. I've struggled with suicidal thoughts most of my life, and I think one of the things that stops me is just simply the thought that there was more I still needed to do. And sometimes that just comes from my guilt from not being productive as productive as I want to be, as we were talking about earlier. It just kind of haunts me, where I think, and then sometimes I just think, who cares? Like, nothing I do is going to be important enough to make to make that much of a difference. But actually, I've been writing with, do you know Craig Northey from The Odds, the band The Odds? So I write with him a lot, and we have a song that's on an album of mine a couple albums ago, a song called "No Song Left to Save Me," which became part of the musical, and that came out of that conversation, that sense that, but who knows, you may still have that one song that's going to speak to one person, that's going to lift them out of the darkest time in their life, and who are you to say that you're not going to write that song? So keep going and keep working, because it just might happen.
Well, Viktor Frankl, Life's Search for Meaning is a really powerful small book, but, he spoke about life in the concentration camps as a doctor, as a Jew and a doctor in the concentration camps. And those who survived felt there was something to live for outside of that camp. I will see my wife again. I will see my child again. I will get out of here. And the others who didn't have that sense of purpose, they couldn't make it. They would die quite quickly and easily because they just couldn't see beyond that day. But sometimes as an artist, I would imagine that you don't even understand the impact of the gift. And then the person comes up to you and says, when I was 17 and I heard your song, and then you realize you're really, it's not just If I Had $1 Million. It was the song that made them actually turn around and do something different with their life. Or, When I Was Young, you just think, oh, yeah. Oh, I know every note of that song. I love that, So I guess in a way, there is a priestly part of being an artist, right? Because your words and your actions can touch people. And then the other side of it is, if they don't like the way you're behaving, then all of a sudden you're the priest who let them down, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then when you got busted and all that, it was just like, not him. He's a nice guy. And he was, so I'm sure
we thought he was a nice guy.
Yeah, we thought he was.
Well, and then add to that being Canadian, who are just about the most judgmental nation on earth when it comes to their own public figures. It's like, oh God, like I used to joke, at least I don't have the pressure of trying to get the Order of Canada now, because now it's never going to happen.
That's right. That one's out. Well, it's like when the Beatles got knighted, and they were very ambivalent about the whole experience, except for Paul.
Paul was fine with it.
Paul's fine with it. Look, that guy still does 3-hour concerts, man.
I know, crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and here's when you talk about ideas of who an artist is, and you get to look at their whole catalog, and Paul McCartney from 1962 to now. This guy, I mean, never mind the fact that he wrote Yesterday and Hey Jude and Helter Skelter and Band on the Run, but like then you go through and it's like all the cheese that we like to think about McCartney being, is that he's kind of this glossy, cheesy, sometimes meaningless. And then there's this side of him that is completely experimental. The stuff is really out there. And it makes me realize that here's a guy who's just done whatever the hell he's wanted to do. Right. That honestly, the cheese is just as out there as the noisy or synth-driven stuff or whatever else, because it's almost unself-conscious. When you see him talk, he seems very self-conscious. He knows he's Paul from the Beatles. When he's making music, it sounds like he's just doing the thing that's in him. And I love that. I think it makes him one of the greatest artists.
Yeah, well put. Do you have that self-consciousness still? Because it sounds like it's It's one of the things that's been peeled away more as time has gone on.
Yes, I don't think I am self-conscious when it comes to making music. I think when I'm making the music, I'm not thinking about that at all. I think when I'm talking, like doing this, I can feel the kind of the veil of self-consciousness, and I'll probably, if I listen back to this, I'd be cringing the whole time. I hate hearing myself speak, but I don't mind hearing my music. And I know that when I'm on stage singing, the moments that I've always craved are the moments of transcendence, the moments where you kind of like disappear and the song continues and you're kind of floating above it. The worst feeling, of course, is when you wake up in the middle of the song, because it's a song that, like The Old Apartment or Brian Wilson or something that I've sung a million times in my life, and I've been transcending through half of it, and then something will kind of jolt me out of it, and I'll think, did I sing that second verse? Maybe am I singing the same thing twice now? Like, I don't know. That's where the self-consciousness comes in. But when, over the last few records, writing and recording, the most gratifying thing has been that for the most part, at the end of the day, when the song is mixed, I think, yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard in my head. And I love the fact that I'm able to now unveil that, or I have the tools to be able to put it down and make it actually sound the way I'd imagined. And that's, I know I don't have the audience I once had. So I think part of you thinks you're not thinking as much about the audience, but you're always thinking about the potential of an audience. You're thinking about, is somebody who's going to hear this, are they going to connect to it in the same way that I'm connecting to it? But I guess I've also learned people can listen to music however they want to listen to it and get out of it whatever they want to get out of it. They don't have to get my meaning or the reason why I sing something. As long as it reaches them in some way, I'm okay with that.
That's interesting, right? That idea that you used to have an audience where there was an arena of people, and now there's an audience of people.
Right.
But then you have to still value the work, but not with the same measuring stick.
That's right. Exactly right. I have no expectations of it, selling a ton of records or anything else. But I do feel like it's something that I need to stand next to with pride and say, this is an accurate reflection of who I am and where I'm at right now for anybody who wants to hear it.
And be true to yourself, not just go, I could write that hit thing again. That would work well. Right.
I'm not good at the imitating other artists. I'm not, I was never a good enough player to be in a cover band. I could only ever, I played guitar to accompany the songs that I made up and, learned as I went along to try to figure out how to accompany myself. But I could never imitate somebody else's playing. So because of that, I'm kind of stuck sounding like me. And that's totally, now I go, oh, that's good. I'm glad. Because I think otherwise the easy thing to do would be, let's make this sound like so-and-so. Let's make this sound like so-and-so. Yeah. And that's not my world.
So after June, 22nd, your birthday?
Yep.
Yeah. So after June 22nd, there's that other side. 50 is the other side. You can't be a kid anymore. Where do you see the journey taking you? Your kids are grown. You got one 15-year-old as a step kid, but your kids for the most part are really into their journey, and over the next few years will really solidify some of those pieces. You're happier than you've been. You're playing music you care about, but where do you go as a person from here, do you think?
I don't know. I think, for the next few years, I think in the music business, it's going to be such chaos a year from now that I think trying to figure out how to keep the lights on is going to be an interesting thing that's going to be pretty all-consuming. Because all the shows that are canceled now are all in the process of being rescheduled for a year from now, which is way far in advance. So where I would normally want to schedule a tour 6 months in advance, I'm now going to have to look a year and a half in advance before anything's available to get booked into. So what am I going to do for the next year in order to kind of keep things going? I think we're going to have to see some. I'm going to have to start innovating in a certain way to try to drum up business, which is a weird way to look at it. Because I've been so lucky since I was 18. This is the only real job I've ever had, is making music. So focusing on how to do that in a way that keeps me both sane and fed is probably going to be the focus of the next couple of years. But like writing this musical, hopefully that'll be on next year. Maybe they'll reschedule it for next season. I'd love to write another one. I mean, I have ideas. I probably need to find collaborators on that. But that's a whole new discipline. Like things like going to rehearsal one day, and as far as I'm concerned, the show's written, and we realize, this character needs a different song here. So let's scratch this song and can we write a new one for here? Can you have it here tomorrow? It's not normally how I operate, but I go back and I write some stuff, and I have to get it down on like record it, and so that the copyist can write it out for the music director and everything else. And there's somebody singing this new song the next day. It's such a trip, and I love it. So I would love to do more of that.
Do you see less spotlight, more creation, or does it just depends on the project?
It does depend on the project. I think there's less. I mean, the spotlight is smaller, and I don't mind that. It's just that the focus has gotten smaller in the when I'm on stage. But the rest of my life, I feel like the spotlight has become a floodlight. Like it's like there's a lot more room to work. I'd love to do more work with the Art of Time Ensemble. I've been doing shows with symphony orchestras. Like you have to kind of dabble in a way, or I have to. But it's also what keeps me energized. And I'd love to find more places to try things out. I think that's the exciting thing now, is that I don't have to feel like that I have to just do the same thing. Like that, the idea of trying different disciplines, I probably would have, if you'd asked me 30 years ago, I would have thought that was for somebody who was 30 years younger. But it's actually kind of perfect for somebody who's getting up there.
Getting up there. I'm way ahead of you, big guy. I've got you by a good mile and a half. So it's, you know what, this is an interesting time in life to be older, because I think you, me, lots of people I know, we thought we should climb this certain mountain, and we got to the top cliff and we felt lonelier than we'd ever felt.
That's right. Yeah.
It wasn't the mountain we thought it was. Yeah. And that's liberating, isn't it? I mean, that's just like, okay, it's not that. I don't need to do that.
Yeah, it took me a long time to learn how to cope with that, or be okay with with that not being the goal anymore.
Yeah.
And it comes down to other people. I mean, that's the other thing I've learned about being a solo artist, is nothing's actually solo. Everything is always with somebody else, like whether it's an accompanist or a manager or a roadie or whatever else. You're doing something with other people. And it's those relationships that make everything interesting and fulfilling and worth doing again.
Do you translate that into marriage?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
It's funny, when you've had two marriages, one of the things I noticed is the first time you thought it was just their fault. The second time the second person says the same things about you, it's like, wait a minute, that's kind of a pattern.
That's true. That is true. Yes. And then you start to realize, okay, maybe I am this thing. Now, how do I fix it?
Exactly.
Comes much later. I wish the how do I fix it came in the same thought as maybe I am that person. But for me, I'm a little slow that way.
I'm a little slow that way. Because you got to come to terms with the fact that we're a never-ending project,
Yeah.
We're never there's no such thing as perfect. You're just going to keep trying, but it's intention, kavanah. In Hebrew
That's
it's
right.
kavanah, right? You got to have a kavanah when you get up in the morning, and you got to be able to look at things like sin, which is not an action that you did as a bad thing. It's just not having good aim, right? We're
Right.
we're trying to get somewhere, but our aim isn't that good, so we just keep misfiring and hitting. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you with that dart. And then you sort of have to collect the pieces of what you've done and what you wanted to do and make them into some wisdom, or else they just become a bunch of disassociated pieces. There's nothing to them. It's just a random act of life. And I tend to think there's something else going on here. I don't know what the hell is going on, but I know something's going on, because the thing that inspires you to write that piece of music, to open to be in what were you, in the Mendelssohn choir or something when you were a
Yeah.
kid? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that power of being in that choir, like when I was in, Forest Hill Collegiate Choir, and we're all cynical and wearing our white shirts because they made us, and we
Yeah.
did Hallelujah chorus, Hallelujah, Hallelujah.
Yeah.
We stop and we're just like, and we just turn and look at each other and just think, oh, I can't even fake that didn't matter. That totally mattered.
Exactly. And it is the greatest feeling. I think like almost nothing beats, to me, the singing with a group of other people. And that's something that sustained us through Bare Naked Ladies and everything else too. But singing with a large group of people like that, I was thinking about like my kids. My kids weren't big into sports, and I certainly wasn't. But the thing that got us all through were things like that. Being in musical theater. My middle son Ben is an actor, graduating from Sheridan this year in musical theater. My eldest son's a conductor. So it's this idea of doing something, in an ensemble, striving for excellence that is beyond any single part in that. Nothing beats
You're
that.
still doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, listen, I've taken a lot of your time. Often over the years, I've wished we bumped into each other on the street just so
Me
we
too.
give a hug and see how we were doing. I'm glad to spend this time with you. I really am.
Yeah, me too, Ralph. Great to see you.
All right, you take care of yourself, take care of your family and your loved ones, and stay safe there in fabulous New York State. All right?
Thank you, sir.
All
Great
right.
to see you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Stephen Page. Stephen Page is somebody you know in many incarnations as a solo artist, and as, of course, founding member of the Bare Naked Ladies and a major songwriter in that band, and an old friend. We kind of started at about the same time, so it was lovely to be able to spend a little time with him. And it's lovely to spend a little bit of time with you in this strange and interesting days that we are living. You take care of each other, and we'll do a lot more of Not That Kind of Rabbi. The good Lord willing, as Tommy Hunter used to say. I'm Ralph Benmergui. Bye-bye.
This podcast has been produced by TMDS and accelerated by Roam Phone. Roam Phone brings you the most reliable virtual phone service to run your business and protect your home number